Thank you very much. Hear me? Can you hear me, please? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, let me say congratulations to the organizers of today's program. Happy Children's Day to our children, our wonderful children. On that note, Her Excellency, I wish to acknowledge your presence, all distinguished guests, our chairman for ACEP. Good day to everybody. I want to acknowledge the important role played by Alaja Oshodi in putting this program together. Having said that, I will just go on to the topic of my own lecture. Coping with the challenges of successful parenting in the 21st century. The child is said to be the father of man. I hope we all agree with that. This is supposed to be a paradox. And this actually refers to the theme of today's events. That is, investing in our future means investing in our children. So that paradox, the child is the father of man, simply means that today's child is the father of tomorrow. So the children of today, we are looking up to them to become, say, the future leaders. But in this paradox, they are the future fathers, because they become fathers and mothers and start raising children tomorrow. So the day of successful parents be emphasized, as life is said to be from cradle to grave. And this also a point out the challenges expected along the journey through life. When we say that life is a struggle from cradle to grave, so the children we are tutoring, they have started struggle with life. They have been assisted or they are supposed to be assisted. First and foremost in the homes by the parents. They are supposed to be the first environment of the child. Then the second agent of socialization, that is the school. So we say that in the study of child psychology, life begins from conception. And so when we look at the study of psychology, which means the scientific study of human behavior, we look at the child in its totality, right from conception. So that's when life begins. If I may give you a joke, at one time, even with my students in the university, then I ask, okay, when is the start of life? Some will tell you when the child is born. It's when they see the child. But that's not the beginning of life. As soon as conception takes place, life begins. And so, educational psychology talks about the child growing from one stage to the other, even in the womb, from conception. And when the child is born, then we begin to look at development of the child. So we look at every factor that affects the child's growth and development, right from conception. We talk about the heredity of the child. And heredity refers to the transference of genetic traits, hereditary traits, from parents to the offspring. Again, this happens at conception. So the parents have no say about this, nor the child. So whatever the child turns out to be, in future, we should know that it is not the business of that child, it is not the fault, nor his responsibility. But as a result of genetic traits, he or she has inherited from the parents. So apart from the heredity, we talk about the environment of the child affecting the growth and development. And simply put, what do we mean by environment? The environment is every other factor which affects the growth and development of the child from conception to adulthood, even to death. So such environment is not limited to the four walls of the classroom, as people usually say. The environment of the child begins even right from conception in the womb. That is the nature of the woman who's carrying the baby in the womb. And we also talk about factors like love. People will say that, how can you love a child that you have not seen? But there's a way by which we radiate love, even to the unborn child in the womb. And it's the responsibility of both parents In educational psychology, we say that, the environment of the child affects whatever the child is going to turn out to be. So the kind of love, the warmth in the home is the first environment. And then when the child moves to the school, that's the second agent of socialization and another environment of the child. The kind of children that the child identifies with, even at home, the siblings, and in the school environments, all other categories of children, the kind of teachers, the books used, whatever the child is taught, these are all part of the environment. And these two factors are actually responsible for the growth and development of children, responsible for where they are similar and when they are different. We talk about nature and nurture. This is when we are referring to heredity and environment. So when we look at the concept of education, because the topic is coping with the challenges of successful parenting in the 21st century, the study of the child itself comes up the educational psychology. And educational steps responsible. And the first aspect is the growth and development, which I've been talking about. Then the second aspect is human learning. How does the child learn when the child begins schooling? Then the third aspect is the measurement and evaluation, or what some people refer to as tests and measurements. The tests and measurements, human learning, will come up under education. What is education itself? We say it's the process of providing information to an inexperienced person to help him or her develop physically, mentally, socially, emotionally, spiritually, politically, and economically. In other words, education can also be referred to as the process through which the individuals are made functional members of their society. It is a process, and we should always emphasize that. Gone were the days when people say that education, was the ability to read and write. No, we have gone past that. So it's the process by which facilities are trained, the process by which people acquire knowledge, and that's what we are doing for children in the school. And the emphasis nowadays, and this is where ACEP comes in, is catching them young. We talk about early childhood education because at a specific age. Right now, we say early childhood education starts from about age 2. They go to learn, to socialize. It's not meant for purely educational purposes, reading and writing. For children at that early age, these are part of the challenges that some parents are having. Some will send their children to school for early childhood education and they'll be saying that the school is not doing enough because their children cannot count 1 to 200, cannot write letters, or they compare one school to the other, but that's not the job. It's the responsibility of teachers at that level. The children are meant to go to school. Even we say that play way method, that's what we use to teach them at that stage. They go out to socialize, and through socializing, they are learning. In childhood education, play way method, they go there, they sing, they dance, they do some counting through songs. That's the element of learning at that stage. And so we say to educate means to train the mind, the character, and the abilities of individuals. Thus, education is a fundamental human right that should be availed to all citizens, irrespective of age, sex, and nationality. The greatest favor that one can do to himself or to herself is to get education, and to others is to give them education. That's where investing in their future comes in. According to a Chinese proverb, education is the best legacy to give a child, because giving your child a skill is better than giving him 1,000 pieces of gold. I love that quotation from the Chinese proverb, because in Nigeria, some people with more emphasis on acquiring wealth, and that's why they are not available for these children. You see some parents waking up and leaving children at home by 4 o'clock, 5 a.m., they are gone to their place of work, leaving these children under the care of house helps who are not even trained themselves, who do not have the education required. And so we emphasize that it is important, just as that Chinese proverb says, give your child a skill. It's better than giving him 1,000 pieces of gold. So the education of the child starts from the home, as I've said earlier on, with the first agent of socialization being the parents. And so the parents serve as the first teacher of the child. Hence, it is said that charity begins at home. Now, the demands of successful parenting in the 21st century. I will look at the charts I put in my write-up and go through it very briefly. There are 4 parenting styles that affect children when they are growing, especially at the childhood stage, early childhood stage. So the parenting style that is provided by the child is bound to have some effects. So I will look at the parenting styles, the description and the effects on children. The first one is authoritarian. Authoritarian parenting style is characterized by rigidity and strict rules. And the results or the outcome, it can lead to depression in children. When a child lives under rigid control, strict rules, he cannot move or do anything by his own creativity or his own idea. Then the child, eventually, when he sees the other children around him or her, they'll become depressed because he's not allowed to make use of his or her initiative. Then the second parenting style is permissive. Permissive style is characterized by indulgence and no limit setting. Such a parent, indulges, the child, no limit setting. The child can do whatever he wants. In other words, the child can jump from table to the floor. Once the child says, "Oh, mommy, I want to do this." "Oh, go and do it." "I want to go out with my friend." "Oh, you can go ahead." "I want to do that." "Oh, you are free, go ahead." That is being permissive. And this can lead to poor impulse control. The child doesn't have any limits, so no control. He's free to do whatever he wants to do. And the third parenting style is indifference. This is characterized by neglect and lack of involvement. There's a slight difference between permissiveness and indifference. When a parent is being indifferent, he doesn't really mind whether the child goes out or he stays home, whether the child is learning, is not learning, whether the child is playing with the toys or he's not even concerned about anything. He's indifferent about it. Doesn't really matter. This is not the best for our children. And so if we want to cope with the challenges of the 21st century, parents have to be alive to their responsibilities. We should be involved in the care of these children. Whatever they do, we should have to be involved. We have to be involved. Get yourself involved. And parents have to be informed about this. This is the enlightenment, so that they will know their responsibility and be up and doing to make sure that the children under their care, given them by God, they are not shortchanged. I used to tell parents that you are the caregiver because you have asked for these children. So you have to be alive to your responsibility. And the fourth parenting style is reciprocal. Reciprocal parenting style refers to or is characterized by shared decision making. Shared decision making, even as young as they are in early childhood stage, you're able to let them talk to you as parents, show interest in their day-to-day activities. They have been sent to play groups to go and play. Yeah, when they come back, what exactly happened today? So it should be characterized by shared decision making and the results, the sense of self-reliance. The child grows up to have sense to become self-reliant. He can take some initiatives. He's allowed to grow and to grow well. In general, it is said that experimental studies have indicated that the most effective parenting style involves consistency and reward for good behavior and punishments for undesirable behavior, both of which should occur within the context of a warm and loving environment. If the child grows up to know love, then the child will show love to other people. It's the environment. But if the child sees the management of the parents as being undesirable, as being a kind of punishment, the child will develop to be strict and unloving to everybody around him or her because he believes that's what is expected of him. And so we look at, after considering the different parenting styles, the stages in growth and development. Our emphasis today is really on early childhood education, but there are some stages in educational psychology that the children have to go through before they become adults. And this calls for some challenges for parents who are supposed to bring them up, to make them become responsible adults in future. The first stage is the neonate period, from birth to 2 weeks, when the child is completely dependent on the caregiver or the parents or the mother. Then infancy period, that's from 2 weeks to age 1, when the child is still learning to do things by looking at the parent or the caregiver. He still needs help, even at that stage. Then the early childhood stage, from that age 1 to 3, 4. At this stage, we encourage parents to allow their children to move out. But at that stage, the child begins to refuse being babied. They come to that stage by age 2. He wants to do things himself or herself. And the child that is allowed to grow, to learn to do things himself, becomes self-reliant. So there is need for children to go from their home to the school for early childhood education, to go and play. We encourage the use of play method, which I've talked about. After the early childhood stage is the later childhood, which is the primary school education. And after that, the child grows into adolescence, which is a problematic area. That's why I mentioned that. So I highlighted this in my paper. Because we said that when the foundation is badly laid, it's poor, what can the righteous do? In early childhood education, that's where we provide the foundation for the future development of the child. And so the parents have a lot of work to do. Now, I cannot really go into detail. After adolescence, the next stage is the adulthood. But adolescent stage gives rise to a lot of problems. Parents will start wondering why the child is going haywire at that stage. It's what has happened, what we have planted into the child in the early childhood stage. And that's why we are advocating that, okay, to cope with the challenges of parenting, successful parenting in the 21st century, parents should learn to do it right with their children. And the problem areas are highlighted that we need to cope with. Number 1 is the education of the child. The education should start, we have said, it's not just reading and writing. It's imparting knowledge, skills, and acquisition, making use of the initiative. From that age, we can encourage children to maximize their potentials. By the time the child grows into adolescence, that is getting to late upper primary school, the child has a lot of things to cope with. And the child that has been well brought up in the primary school, in the early childhood training, develops the ability to cope successfully by the time you get to adolescent stage. And that, the challenges of the 21st century, I will just rush through that. The education for all is being advocated, and it comes up under the 8 Millennium Development Goals. But then if you look at Nigeria, as well as some nations still developing, many cannot provide free education for their children. Especially in the early childhood education program, you see many parents complaining about the money to be paid. But what I tell people is that, well, if you say education is expensive, people say try ignorance. What your child is bound to gain, if well developed, if you make the investments in our child and the future generation. So we are investing in our future. And so that calls for parents to work hand in hand, and appealing to government also to put in more funding into our educational system, right from the early childhood education, so that our children will be well developed and be provided around the education to be up in life as well. Then another challenge is social life. You can see the problem now in our society. In fact, the whole world, we say it's a global village. Social networking, internet usage. Children from that early childhood program at that level, many of them have started making use of the internet, not only the computer. A child some months, 6 months, 1 year now, will be struggling to get the telephone, mobile phone from their parents, and they start to puncture, to press the button. So that has started at that level, but then parents should monitor the activities of the children, even right from that stage, from age 2 to age 3. The friends they are moving with when they go to school, they have started going to play. And I'm going to round up on that notes. I said parents should be very close to them and monitor their movements. Talking about the social life and our society more corrupt nowadays. Do you know that children are being abused even when they're not in school? I've handled so many cases where children have been abused And when they get home, trying to tell parents, the parents say, keep quiet, shut up. What do you know about that? And that's the story I will tell you before I round up. I was invited to a school, to handle their problems, social problems, nursery school. By the time I finished talking to the parents, I don't have time to go into detail. Some women, some mothers started crying. And I tried to find out what's the cause of their being upset. And the woman said, she never knew that she should listen to her daughter at age 3 in the nursery school. The girl came home one day and was saying, Mommy, look at my clitoris. And she was pointing to her private parts, private organ, vagina. And the mother said, shut up. What do you know about that? What are you saying? Will you keep quiet? He said, so the girl knows the clitoris. Mommy, she was looking at me, said, are you sure my daughter? I said, of course, somebody must have been, fiddly with her kids. That's her private parts. And it starts from that age, even from the primary school, abusing the girls. So parents, please be alive to your responsibility. You develop some social skills in your children, be close to them, listen to them that they give to us. Parents, listen to your children, give them sound education. So you should be the first parents, the first teacher of your children, and their friends, not only teacher, be friends to your children. Get to know them and find out who they relate with and what they do in the school every day. God will bless all our children, God will bless our parents, and make us responsible parents, even as we nurture these children. Thank you very much for listening. Happy celebration.